So, episode 23.
Episode 23.
Today's teacher celebration.
Yeah.
But before we get into that.
Well, first of all, so we would be completely remiss in our world of movies if we did not pay a little bit of tribute to Chadwick Boseman.
T'Challa.
I don't know about you, but this one hit pretty hard, and then the outpouring on social media is almost more than any one person can handle. So, our family, I'm sorry. We're thinking of you, and we understand, and we keep you in our hearts and our prayers. Whew.
Let me just ask you, what has he meant, not only to you as a fan, but just as...
Gosh, OG. I
mean, the outpouring, not just from, fans, but like from Hollywood and everything he's done in his career.
If I ugly cry now, then I'm going to look like this the whole day, the whole show. I think a lot of us that are in education and we work with kids who have never seen themselves represented, that they were given something in him that I think a lot of kids don't have. Like, they don't have it in enough books, and they don't have it enough on television. And this was a person that not only led his people, but also believed in that power. So, crap. So I'm sitting here crying about a person I've never met, but
it's like you've known him through, these interviews he's given and the films we've seen him in. I mean, Black Panther put him on another level.
That's probably the case. There's no tissue over here.
I'll get you some. I'll get you some.
And so it's good until we went live, and then, we're already going to talk about kind of a topic that's difficult to talk about, and probably even more difficult now because of the world we're currently in. But anyways, all of us at Reels and Heels are sending love and prayers to all of the fans out there, but also to his family, because I think it was pretty sudden.
Yeah, I mean, I lost it when you just showed me where I had all the Marvel characters and Black Panther was heading up, and they said, "Say hello to Stan."
But the other picture that you showed where little kid was standing, and all of his Avengers were standing around him. Well, now you ruined the show.
I didn't.
No, I ruined the show. Okay. So I'm going to get my crap together here. Hold on. So I guess an equally difficult topic this week is teachers and movies. And it's funny how we're talking about it now with all of us heading back to school, but also the year that we've had. Beginning of 2020, everybody, teachers weren't even on the radar. And then during the pandemic, we were, we didn't get paid enough, and we were, we were powerful and we were all these things. And then after the pandemic and things got worse and they're talking about reopening schools, a lot of people started vilifying us again for caring about exposure. And I think a lot of times that people did not. In the beginning of 2020, everybody, teachers worried on the radar. Equate it with that we were just worried about ourselves. But it's so much bigger than that, because it's not just us being on the front lines. I'm nowhere near equating myself to a healthcare professional. I think by far they're out there, risking their lives every single day. I go into a classroom that is generally clean, but I cannot socially distance from children when there's, a group of them in class, and, and they can't really socially distance from themselves. Like, we are not built that way. So I just felt that this is a good time to kind of pay a little bit of homage to the teachers that have kind of lit up our screen over the last probably 60 years, because I have a few from the 60s that are on here too. So
yeah,
I think that it's just us this week. There was a change in plans. Originally, we were going to be off the air this week, and we had some plans change. And so we decided that we would go on air today and take off next week. But it definitely hit us hard today. The only other time it hit me this hard was the loss of
Stanley, it hurt.
Heath Ledger, Carrie Fisher,
but Robin Williams. That whole day
and Stanley. It's just, the world's not right without them. So I'm sorry. I will try to get my crap together.
So I was going to ask you, as a teacher, a lot of these resonated with you growing up. Did they influence you to become the teacher that you are?
I think probably. Like, a lot of them,
Speaking of Robin Williams, probably Dead Poet Society.
Dead Poet Society and Good Will Hunting are two of the ones that I think probably resonate the most. For that care. And a lot of the other ones, it's just the fun that people deliver. Like, for a lot of kids, school is hard. And so when they have a teacher that puts the extra effort in to care about them, but also to try to make it fun. And I don't want to say easy, because, life in school isn't easy, but to have them really take the time and, come up with ways that make it meaningful and educational, but also fun, so that the kids remember that and they don't realize that they were learning something. I think that is important too, that we have so many kids that live on this continuum of what we consider below level and above level. And we're teaching all of them in our classes. So to find a way to get to everyone is really important. And we strive for that every day. And I think sometimes we don't make it, but we try. Every single day, we just walk back into the classroom and try again. But I think about that. It's like, a lot of the teachers that I had were the same way. They cared about you. They invested their time and energy into you, and they brought the subject to life. And I think that's wholly important. I kind of feel like I need to put my hair up now.
Yeah. I know growing up through the 90s, 80s and 90s, shows like
there were a lot of
Boy Meets World.
There were a lot of shows. Boy Meets World, Saved by the Bell. I mean, like, when we talk about people, how we wanted to have teachers like we always wanted to have teachers like Miss Bliss, and we always wanted to have a principal like Mr. Belding, and we always wanted to have a teacher like Mr. Feeney, even though you could tell that they just they made his life so much more difficult in the stream of things, and he never stopped. He always did the right thing and, helped them through. And even though they like to irritate him and harass him, I think there was a big part of us, when we were growing up, that was like, I want to be that teacher.
Yeah. I know I was never going to be a teacher. I always appreciated teachers. I had great teachers growing up. I think one of the TV, it was a film, Edward James Olmos, Stand and Deliver.
Yeah.
I always wanted a teacher like that cared, I had teachers that cared, but like there was something about that character. I always wanted a teacher like that.
I think that is like a reoccurring theme too. And I think in our culture, mostly because we assume that kids that live in inner cities or kids that come from poverty and violence and things like that, school isn't going to be the first thing on their mind. I think a lot of times they're stereotyped as not caring about school and not wanting to get an education and not being able to. And I think that, when that's what we see, we know that, teachers like Jamie Escalante and, quite a number of them here.
What was the teacher that Matthew Perry played?
Ron Clark. So, like Jamie Escalante and Ron Clark and Dangerous Minds. Michelle Pfeiffer played her. And then Hilary Swank and Freedom Writers. I think all of these people who expected their kids to, rise to those expectations and to meet the challenge. And those kids appreciated the fact that even though at first it was difficult, they understood that it was really for them. It wasn't for anybody else. And so I think that right there is, you're going to hold this standard for these kids to live up to. And it's not that they can't attain it. It's that everything in the world is going to push them in a different direction so that they don't attain it. And that's our societal norms. That's our, our own beliefs about culture. It's about our beliefs about race and poverty and, inner cities and all of these things, that if you're given a person who truly cares, you can have an impact on their lives and they can achieve what they want to achieve. So it was very difficult to watch some of them after I became a teacher because some of it was realistic. Some of it it's a movie. So some of it is a little bit more of what we would hope that's our desire for it to look like. But a lot of times, I think Stand and Deliver was a fairly good portrayal of it. And I think Freedom Writers and Dangerous Minds was too. And so was Lean on Me. Movies like that where you're kind of at odds with the norm. You're at odds with the group of people that you're trying to educate and their families, because, we want them to succeed and we don't want to have to, as teachers, we don't want to have to give them less because society expects less from them.
Yeah. So out of, all the type of movies that we've seen and you've seen, you would say that films involving teachers are probably more on point than, say, other stuff about professions?
I don't know. I think
a lot of like the medical stuff, I I'm not sure if it's on point. I mean, I'm not in the medical field to say how accurate they are.
I would say that probably a lot of the stuff that happens on medical shows is pretty on point, but it's also a fast-paced, environment. And so is education, and so is being in a classroom. But you have those moments where you do have to pay attention to what's going on with specific, individuals. And I think that's kind of the cornerstone of, I think, teachers in movies, is that there's a lot of the stuff that we think teachers mean. And a lot of it is true for us, but a lot of it, there's this humor that goes along with it, because we know it's part of our job, but it's also something that nobody would understand. If you're not a teacher, you don't really understand it. Like, so this is my Eddie B comedy t-shirt, and it says, "I'm already professionally developed." We laugh and we joke about professional development. We talk about meetings that could have been emails. We do all of those things. And it doesn't mean that we care less or that we don't want to be there or whatever. It's like, we are always continually learning, and we're always continually in trainings and meetings and reading, and we're trying to be better at our craft. Those of us who truly are in it for, the passion and the calling. But it's some of the other things that get elevated in a movie about teachers, is just how important those certain things are. So like in Stand and Deliver, overall, the theme was that he is going to help them no matter what. And at the end, I don't know how much anybody knows about Jamie Escalante, but he did actually get in trouble around the time that the kids were taking the test at the end of the year, because one of the kids did cheat. And he found out afterwards and didn't turn him in. At least I think that's how it went. And so as I'm reading that, it's like, the thing is I think sometimes we forget, like, as people, that when we see somebody doing something authentic and they know how to do it and they do it well, that just because they can't pass the test on it doesn't mean that they don't understand or that they can't do something. And I think that is the part that is the hardest for a lot of people to understand. It's like, this is the rule. And, he clearly could do what he was being asked. It's just that he couldn't perform on the test, and he felt the need to cheat or to whatever. So I think in this world where we rely so much on testing, it's important that we kind of look at the child or the individual and say, are they learning it authentically? Because they may really learn it authentically, but the test doesn't mean anything because of the way they have to take it.
Yeah, see, when I'm watching something that has to do with teachers or involving school and stuff, I like to see the students be portrayed accurately on how, like, I remember being in the classroom and seeing, and of course, you being a teacher, I'm sure seeing a film, you're like, kids don't do that, or kids do that.
It's always funny because I'd watch, like, Boy Meets World, and I'm like, yeah, they don't do that. Like, middle schoolers, they don't do that. But I have had classes that were very much like Freedom Riders and very much like Dangerous Minds. And
there was this like back in Vegas, then, right?
Yeah. And the tougher crowds of people. I taught in before I left Michigan, I did my practicums in Flint, in inner city schools. And when you are the only person in the classroom that is considered different, because every kid in the classroom looks different than you, whatever they've brought to the classroom, they have made a decision about you already. So, we forget that, in a profession that's predominantly white female, I would say about 87% of the teachers in the profession are white and female.
Why is that?
I don't really know. And a lot of studies have been shown that it maybe doesn't matter if your teacher necessarily represents your demographic. But I think that, we always been a female-based profession, really.
Well, that kind of makes sense, because when I was going to school, I probably had like 3 male teachers.
I think I had more male teachers, but I had male teachers in science and history. And I had more male teachers in math, although the only math teachers that ever taught me anything were female. So, that being said, I think that means something. But if you have a room full of kids that have brought with them their bias, they're waiting for you to prove them right. And I think that is the biggest hurdle. That while we watch movies like Freedom Writers, and we watch movies like To Serve with Love, and we watch movies like Up the Down Staircase, so we watch movies where the person in the classroom is the opposite of her general classroom demographic. I think we start getting into a place where the kids have an understanding that this person is probably not on their side, and they have to be forced to understand that. So I think those are probably the hardest things for me. Although most of my kids don't care what color or what language I speak. We're having a phone problem. But it's fair enough. Oh, yeah. But yeah, so a lot of the movies, I think, that talk about race, like Dangerous Minds and Freedom Writers and Stand and Deliver, because they were in the inner city.
Yeah, Stand and Deliver was East LA. Freedom Writers, I think, was also in LA.
Was in LA. And then
Dangerous Minds, I think, was in Chicago.
Dangerous Minds, yeah, I think it was either New York or Chicago. And then Up the Down Staircase is in New York City. So when you think about places that are generally tougher areas where the kids see more and have to survive more, I think that they don't see the value of going to school, and it takes somebody that really cares about them to break down those walls and to make them see that getting education is important and being part of that system is important. Because I think that's one of our struggles. But as a teacher, I think the more fun you can have, like I think back to teachers that I had. Why did I love them? Because they were fun. They were energetic. They cared about us. They thought that we were, funny. But it was nice to, have movies that made me think about it. So it's weird not having anybody to talk to.
Yeah, this week kind of.
It really is. It's weird not having anybody on the show with us.
But it's nice to listen to you talk about teaching.
Willow's in the chat, though. Hi, Willow.
And Alfred, I saw what he said here.
Alfred's in the chat, too.
I like this one.
And you know what? Substitute teaching. Y'all, that job is hard. So if teaching is hard, substitute teaching is even harder. So yeah. Okay. Hats off to substitute teachers.
I'm looking at this list here, and I see a movie on there, and I had a conversation with somebody about that movie.
Oh, well, let's plug this for a second before we go on. So Alfred is going to be on the Kitchen Killer show on Wednesday on their Facebook show. They're live at 7:05. So I think that to give them a little plug, he's getting ready. So
look, he's going to be drawing something, huh?
So I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, he said
be a live drawing. So I'm sorry. I just felt like I had to plug. We have all these people that come in and drop in our chat. and support us and share our videos, that I feel like we need to support and share theirs too. So
it's a good cause. Pay it forward.
Yep.
So that's the movie I see on this list. And I'm wondering, though, because of certain issues, is that movie tainted for you?
Because of Kevin Spacey?
I had a conversation with somebody, and they said it kind of is tainted for them. I mean, it's a good movie.
I don't know. I haven't seen it since we found out about him. So, I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't feel like it would be. Because let's just face it, anybody who's famous, we have to remember that they're human. But we also have to remember that they're not playing themselves. They're playing a character.
Right.
So however that character was written, it's what they brought to the role. I do have to say that I only ever saw that movie once. Yeah. So
I remember we lived in Vegas when they were filming it.
Yeah, and I cried my stinking eyes out. Yeah. So
and it was funny because if I remember correctly, Clark County School District sent an email to the whole district saying that the movie was being filmed. And
yeah. And I think that anytime somebody plays a teacher, that there's an effort on their part to make sure that it's as real as they possibly can get it. I have not met Ron Clark in person, but I have watched his videos where he talks about his school in Atlanta. And we went and saw him as educators here in Florida. He came to Polk, and he did a talk, and
it was kind of like a TED talk.
It was very much like the persona that was given off in the movie. Mm-hmm. So I feel like, you know, if that's how every day is at his school and how he is rigorous and feels that kids are all different and deserve the types of educational learning opportunities that he gives at his school, that, you know, I feel like that was a really a good parallel. I think it was portrayed very well. And then I don't know.
Well, let's talk about this one because you truly adore that movie.
Which one?
Mr. Holland's Opus.
Okay, so aside from the fact that I absolutely love Richard Dreyfuss and everything that Richard Dreyfuss is in, it was just kind of that, like, I think I saw it while I was studying to be a teacher. And then when I watched it again after I became a teacher, I kind of understood it more. It's like
that scene at the end always gets me.
Well, you know, like, we always try to live in this world where there's this line between our classroom and our own personal children. And I didn't really, I mean, I understood it because I'd do crazy things like stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning and plan the best lesson I could possibly plan and grade papers and do all kinds of things like that. But I didn't have kids then. And so now having my own children, and I think about maybe not the same exact situation that he dealt with in the movie where his son was deaf and he was a music teacher. It just, like, it's amplified in the fact that you give so much to the thing you love that sometimes, no matter how you look at it, something takes a back seat because there's just not enough of you to do it all. And so if you're giving your all to your class, you kind of feel like you're not giving it to your family. And if you're giving it all to your family, then you kind of feel like you're lacking something in class. And I think that that's the general consensus when you talk to teachers, is that we feel like there's always this push and pull for us. And in Mr. Holland's Opus, I think that his son just wanted to be loved, and he wanted to understand that his father appreciated and loved music so much that that was the issue. But I think it was really hard for him to see how he could live in a world where his son was deaf. Yeah, so he doesn't bark.
Yes.
But I love that movie. Love that movie. And then we talked about the Ron Clark story. So I kind of want to go like way, way back.
Okay.
So in the 60s, now, mind you, education was a lot different in the 60s. That being said, and there's a lot of movies that teachers are involved, but it's not really about teachers. So there is To Sir with Love with Sidney Poitier, and he is teaching in London's East End. So that already is kind of a culture clash. And I think that, like we said, with it being a basically female profession, having a male teacher brings a difference of vision, I guess, to it. And then him being African American and his students being generally all white adds that minority versus majority kind of thing to it. And that culture clash, that like differing of opinions.
Right.
I haven't seen it in a long time, so I can't really speak to exact the details, but it really kind of started, I think, the trend. And in that same year, we had Up the Down Staircase, which is a book by Belle. I can't think of her last name. I'll put it in the comments when I know, but it's a book. It was written in the early 60s, and in 1967 it was made into a movie. And she's a white woman in the inner city of New York, starting as a teacher. She wasn't an experienced teacher. These were her first years as a teacher, and her conversations with parents about having high expectations and high standards, and it's still very poignant today. But there is a section in the trailer where they talk about where one of the mothers is saying, you gave him a D, and she says, he earned a D. He gave himself a D. And so she says, well, at 8:30 every night, he goes in the garage and he works on the cars, and he wants to be good at working on cars. So he isn't going to be good at anything if he gets a D. And the teacher responds with, he gave himself a D. So in graduating and all those requirements for that too, it was, if you want to do something and do it well, you have to become a well-rounded individual.
And you've had these type of experiences.
She did not give up on her expectations. I think the problem that we come into is that we realize things are hard for kids, and so we don't want to see them struggle. So when we don't want to see them struggle, we lower our expectations and we allow them to get away with less. And the world's not going to let them get away with less. So why do we? Now, an understanding teacher isn't going to give their expectations. It's not going to give on their expectations, but they're also going to understand. And by having this conversation with the mother, she honestly really started to get the mother to understand that she wanted much more for her son than what he was putting in. And rightfully so. I think we're all like that.
Do you have a story that you would like to share about a student or students in the same type of situation? That was there a student that you saw potential and you saw them grow?
There's always potential in all of my students. I think it's different the way you see them grow. First year in Las Vegas, it's like you see kids that, even if their strong suit isn't writing or reading or whatever, they push themselves to do the very best possible that they can. And then all the other stuff kind of takes over. Like, we don't realize that part of being an individual in the society is that it's not just about what they learn in school. It's about all the other stuff too. So we are educating the entire child, not just not just what they're learning in school, but we're educating them to be thinkers and problem solvers. And we're the people that are backing them up, saying you have to believe in yourself.
I know you have a few past students that follow you on Facebook now, and to this day, they always thank you for being the teacher that you were.
I think, well, in the bad days where, your lesson doesn't go well and the whole day is just a gigantic educational shit show, it's always nice to read comments where your kids are like, oh, yeah, but you were so much fun, or you were so funny. And it's nice to know that I was able to do those things for them. Like, I love the fact when they respond back and say, I actually like to read now. And, you always made it more fun to talk about books and to read. And you made it seem like it wasn't as hard. And I think that's where we have to realize that kids need to start somewhere. And in education, some of our buzzwords are like growth mindset and things like that. It's like the power of yet is so important. It's like, well, if you give up, then you never know. So I tell my kids, Michael Jordan said that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. If you don't try, then you never get better. If you never put yourself out there, you never see what you could do. And so when we talk about that, I always talk in the classroom. I tell my kids, I'm like, it's going to be hard and it's going to suck and you're going to hate it, but you're going to do it. And then you're going to find out that all of that struggle has put you in a place now where you can understand what's next.
And it's interesting you brought up Michael Jordan because Kobe Bryant has a very similar quote.
That's another one where we've just celebrated the anniversary of his death. It's like we talk about, giving back. We were just talking about giving back, and how they believe that education and their community is important, and they give back, and they put themselves in places where they can go and see the kids in the area that they grew up, or start community centers and clinics and things like that. I think that, we need our communities to join forces with our schools and really be there for our kids. And it's not just about kids and teachers. It's about the community members too, that our kids could learn from. I mean, imagine a world where we didn't have people to look up to. People like Michael Jordan and people like Kobe Bryant and people like Chadwick Boseman and other people who have, paved the way in one way or another and said, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to, shine a light on that and give back to the community and help others. And I think that that's more important than anything. And our kids have to see that. Our kids have to care about that. They have to know we care about them.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to mention a film. It's not necessarily education, like teacher-wise, but Patch Adams.
I cannot talk about Patch Adams.
I mean,
that
he was somewhat a teacher to making people laugh, and feel good, and teaching about the way he used medicine.
Well, and laughter is the best medicine. But I think like anybody who wants you to think about your situation in life and how you can make it better. Like I think anybody that does that is kind of a teacher in a way to, teach you how to feel your way through the world that we live in, because it's messy a lot of times. So we talked about Stand and Deliver, talked about Dangerous Minds and Freedom Writers. And for the most part, these teacher movies are kind of, I think, the movies that are our go-to movies. When we talk about teachers being role models. And
well, then talk about Dead Poet Society. Captain, oh my Captain.
I think that really is probably the most iconic vision of teachers. You know, like I think that Robin Williams' portrayal of that side of teaching, of saying that, you know, there's this beauty in the words, in the world that we live in, and that people are trying to tell us about their experiences through literature. And he stands on the desk and he reads Captain, oh Captain, my Captain, and the kids follow suit. And it just kind of, it's everything you want your classroom to be.
Right. And this was what?
It sometimes isn't.
Was it the 50s, right? I think.
It was at a boarding school.
I think it was in the 50s. It took place
I think it took place in the 50s.
Or early 60s.
And like I said, it's been a while since I've seen that movie too. And some of them, like lot of Robin Williams movies, I haven't been able to watch.
That's a teacher character that you strive to be.
It's because he's iconic. That I care about my kids. I want them to understand and learn the most amazing, you know, the most amazing parts of the subject that I teach. I want them to love it like I do.
Yes, literature, reading. That's how you strive to teach Oliver and Brighton. You want them to be the best readers.
I don't think that I'm doing a very good job. Although they are reading a little bit more. Not so much Oliver, but more Brighton. But it's like, it's movies like that, and movies like Lean on Me, where, you know, he wasn't going to back down and he wasn't going to change his expectations for anyone. So this is the way it's going to be, and everybody is going to rise to it, and we'll all be better. And I think that our schools have to feel like that. Like we all have to be in it for the same goals at the end of everything. And then there's a handful of movies that, like, from the 60s, I think it was 1962, we watched in school, we watched The Miracle Worker about Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan. And I always say I'm a teacher, not a miracle worker. And I always think about Annie Sullivan when I do that, because my kids don't have nearly as many obstacles standing in their way. And I know that they can still learn. But Helen Keller had so many obstacles in her way that Annie Sullivan not only had did she have to, does that mean that we're not okay? Yeah. I was like, every time the thing spins, I'm like, are we not on?
No. Oh, it happens sometimes.
So I'm just gonna sit there and wait for it to like
there we
go around. And then there are movies that make you think about they're not really teacher movies, but they're coach movies. So I always pull quotes from Remember the Titans and Coach Carter. So I pull quotes from both of those movies because it doesn't always take a teacher. Sometimes it takes somebody who believes in them from a different place. So like if you want to play sports, you also have to do well in school. And that. Okay, so we're back.
Sort of.
I don't know how long for. But so Coach Carter and Remember the Titans, I think it has come from a coach. Sometimes somebody who has all of those things in mind when they're teaching and talking to kids. But
McFarland USA too.
And and with Kevin Costner, the McFarland USA and the track team, right? Was it track or cross country? Cross country?
It was
So it was another sports movie. And then, of course, this is going to be a short show. It's going to be a really short show because that's really annoying.
That is annoying. Darn internet.
So like Coaches, it was based on a true story. Oh, and because Remember the Titans has Denzel Washington in it, and so did The Great Debaters.
Right.
I think that we have to give a lot of credit to movies like that where you're seeing intellectual people reaching out to better an entire community. I think that is important. And he also, being the kind of person that he is when he speaks, like when you go back and you watch some of these movies he's in and you think about their effect on others. So listening to some of the conversations he had while a lot of the civil unrest was happening in the last few months, when he talks about how important it is for people to have role models and to have, parents that are involved in their lives, and talks about how his dad was involved in his life and that made all the difference for him because a lot of his friends didn't have that, and that it affected them differently than, I think that's important.
Right.
And I don't know. I enjoy listening to him talk.
Yeah. And then of course there's some stuff that in the comedy realm involving education, like Summer School.
And here's what I think is funny. Like, we would like to poke fun at teachers a little bit because there's the show on, is it Comedy Central? I don't know, but it's called Teachers.
Oh yeah.
And they're like stereotypes exemplified. Like, I know people that are like that, but I will say that not all teachers are like that. Please don't just watch it and think that we're all crazy. Some of it I can laugh about, but some of it I'm like, oh my God, they're making us look stupid.
I think it's kind of like professional wrestling where they take like real life and just turn it up.
Exaggerate the things that they want to over exaggerate. I think that Bad Teacher, Easy A, Summer School, all of those teacher movies that were comedy based.
Right.
I think a lot of them had a lot of reality in them, but also took it to the very hilt.
Right.
It's like, if you can't teach, which I'm sorry is not true, because if you can't do math, you can't teach math. And if you can't write, you definitely can't teach it. But that being said, I think that, the ulterior motives, I think they get that wrong. Cameron Diaz was doing it because it was an easy job for money.
Yeah, you definitely do it for the money.
Yeah, I do it for the money. Totally for the money. Because, I don't have 3 times the student debt that I make in a year. But okay. I love when people are like, oh, you get paid through the summer. No. I get paid for the 185 days that I was contracted for. Then they take that 185 days and they spread it across the 12 months of the year so that I have a paycheck every month.
Oh, so you're not like buying mansions and Maseratis and stuff?
Did you see, Betsy? That's not paid for yet? And our tiny house. Oh, and my credit score.
You mean you don't have an 800?
It's not quite half that, but it's pretty low. But I think that we laugh at that because that's what society thinks. And that's, again, the perpetuating a stereotype and over exaggerating it. But there are extremely hilarious movies if you sidestep the fact that they were not being honest, like School of Rock.
Which is also a true story.
I mean, this guy loved music so much and his band couldn't get off the ground, and I get it. But he did lie to everybody. But the kids ended up loving him so much because he made them love music even more. And they made it fun.
And then he actually ended up loving what he was doing.
Yeah. And so he became a teacher, which is pretty awesome. But that means that he could play music all day and hang out with people that appreciate it just as much as he did. And I think that is kind of the catalyst for education, is that we want our kids to love what we're teaching them just as much as we do.
Right.
And I'm not silly enough to think that my kids come to see me. They don't. Maybe they come to see me, like the human that I am. But I don't think they come to yes. But yeah, those who can't teach, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. But then there's fun little things like 10 Things I Hate About You is one of my all-time favorite movies, but there's no way that high school kids act like that. Minus the lunchroom scene where he takes the tray and draws a set of boobs on it. That is fairly correct. And when he drew a penis on the other kid's face, that's true. Like, because I
could totally see that. I have seen,
there are a handful of rotten assholes that are at high schools everywhere across the nation, but the things that they get away with, the way that they talk to teachers, the way that that was not going to happen. But the teacher, I think that was another part of my favorite things, because he didn't put up with any shit from his kids. And he's like, go to the office. And she's like, but why? And he says, because you're pissing me off. And I'm like, if you hang out with high schoolers or middle schoolers at any point, there's a fine line between, telling them like it is and trying to be as professional and nice as possible.
Right.
And some people are better at it than others.
So I just thought of this one, The Breakfast Club.
Man, I'd be really upset if I had a principal like that. But I think that I never had Saturday school, but I never had anybody that left us to our own devices at a school. So
I've been to Saturday school. I'm sorry.
I don't think that it's like that.
It's pretty much you go to a room and you're there for however many hours. Usually it's like 4 hours. And the teacher there is basically babysitting you.
Well, yeah, because you've done something wrong.
We would be there, and the teacher would be like reading a newspaper or a book while we're just there in the classroom.
Okay, well, I don't know who these teachers are because I don't trust the children. And every Saturday school that I ever had, we had lessons that we had to do. So there were like test prep lessons. So it wasn't like I was doing Saturday school because somebody was being a butthead. I did Saturday school because we were doing test prep and we were getting kids ready for writing writing tests and the school tests and stuff. But well, Alfred, it has its perks. In middle school, there's less snot. That's a perk. Although there's just as much vomit, and you would think they'd get better at getting there before they, but no, they don't. But yeah, they can be. They can be.
Well, it's kind of funny though how you kind of got thrown into middle school when you didn't even really study to be in middle school.
I never wanted to teach middle school. I always wanted to teach little kids. I never even wanted to go past 4th grade.
Well, that's your background, early childhood.
Yeah, so I was an early childhood educator, and I spent 11 days in Reggio Emilia. I was studying daycare models and early childhood, and I was not ever going to teach past 4th grade. And then I couldn't find a job, and I got a phone call, and they said it's in middle school, and I said, okay, because my student loans were coming due. And yes, I appreciate it because it's a rough, but elementary school has it's rough too. I think that people don't accept that teaching is hard. And I don't know, sometimes you just do it. And so I took the middle school job, and I just ended up really enjoying middle school. But I think it's because they understand sarcasm. You can joke with them a little bit, and they start to kind of have their own personalities that are not childlike. They start to think about the things that their parents say, and they start to, push themselves a little bit differently. I'm not saying that kids, like little kids, don't. There's a whole lot of personality in my house. Believe me, 9 and 6, they have personality, a whole lot of it.
But the whole teaching job, you also lived in a state where there was like 400 plus for one.
At one point, the University of Michigan School of Education was graduating 800 teachers a year. And in my county, there were 438 applicants for every one position that was available. So you put your application in, you may or may not get chosen for an interview. And chances are it was going to go to someone who was either switching from another school or was a substitute in the district already. And because I was going to school full time, I wasn't subbing because there weren't any education classes at night. The latest education class was from 5 to 7. And so there wasn't a lot of time to work a full-time job and go to school to become a teacher and sub too. So I was not going to be a shoo-in for a lot of positions. So I went to another state and got my teaching career started, and then ended up here in Florida, which is a whole nother ball of wax. But I think people don't realize that good teachers, and we still have a teacher shortage. That's the thing. Like, good teachers don't show up because you're going to pay them more. Good teachers show up because of the kind of climate you build around education, and whether teachers believe that they're going to be respected and treated with some form of professionalism. I am really annoyed by times when I see on the news that there's a teacher that makes the news for something some scandal. And it's just disheartening to know that I work really hard for my kids and I would never do that, but then I'm punished because somebody else made bad choices. And, I haven't been sanctioned. I've never been in trouble. I am very careful about testing and other places in the field where, you need to have a very solid ethical ground. I feel like that needs to be conversations that are had with, people in education, where we're trying to dismiss some of the negative stereotypes that we see.
Well, we recently watched that Hugh Jackman Bad Education film that took place in New York. where they got money and the money wasn't spent right?
Well, and then somebody was always, and I think that is probably a very real thing in most of our school districts, is we have to prove where we're spending the money. And I do think that a lot of times it's not spent in the right place. But I also know that when that happened, there was a big push that same year for those funds to be protected and only, what's the word? Dispersed to pay the POs. So there was no, you had to prove for reimbursement, like you had to prove that the money was spent on something, and it had to be specific things. Now, I'm not saying that every place does that, and I'm not saying that no county has ever had other additional problems after that movie, but I think that heightened a lot of the spending requirements and a lot of the reasons why sometimes our things don't get reimbursed the way we would want them to.
Can we just say how good though Hugh Jackman was in that movie?
The
whole cast.
He and Allison Janney were amazing in that movie. But I think that's how we all feel, is that it's just a little bit. And I mean, we could say the same thing about Breaking Bad. It's like, if you don't like what somebody's doing, then pay them more. But at the end of the day, it's not just about being paid more. It's about being treated like a professional. I have a professional degree. I went to school for 5 years and then 2 years to get my master's, and I'm working on my specialist degree. When do people treat me like a professional in the field? I feel like that needs to be above all more important.
You can do a show all about that.
Well, I could. But Ron DeSantis has to believe that teachers are worthy, and not just new teachers to get them in the building, but to the teachers that have lasted 15, 20, 25 years, 40 years, the teachers that last even with entire shifts in culture. I think that's important. And while teacher movies do talk about that shift in culture, we have to start thinking about how, we want to be portrayed in the next 50 years of teacher movies.
Okay. Let's hop into the fictional teacher realm and something that you love with your comics in the classroom, and that's Charles Xavier and the X-Men.
Well, the X-Men always has a special place. But I think if you think about the X-Men as an allegory for our education system now, it's like we all believe that kids can learn, and it's all about how we nurture the gifts that they already have. So if you have a good teacher, if you have someone who believes and cares about you,
I guess you can say Magneto too. Like, even though they're on two sides, like he does.
But Magneto never. I think I think it's right when people talk about him being an anti-hero, because he's on the side for someone to listen. And I think that when we feel that way about our lives, is always kind of being forced into situations that made you feel bad for who you were. I mean, and he couldn't hide it. It wasn't like he could sneak around. It was something he couldn't control in a heightened emotional state. And everything that happened to him was a heightened emotional state.
But like, they're completely the same, just on two different sides of the fences. I mean, I think both are great teachers in their right. Like, they both have the passion for what they believe.
When I think you're molding young minds to believe something. And so do you want them to believe the status quo, or do you want them to think for themselves? And I think that Xavier wants them to rise up and be, decent mutants. He wants them to be better. And I feel like that's putting people kind of in this this feeling of Jackie Robinson, that everybody wanted to elevate him to a place. He had to elevate himself to a place where people took him seriously.
Right.
And so I think Xavier does a lot more of that. Like, we have to be better. We have to be, we have to be more. And you have to be more good and more, giving and kind and wonderful. And Magneto says, I guess you're just going to be yourself. And I don't think he was really out for himself. It's just he didn't agree with the status quo. He wanted more for himself, and he wanted more for the people that followed him. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that you need to have an easy medium somewhere in the middle of people who are willing to push, but not lose sight of individuals.
Yeah, definitely Xavier is a teacher. It kind of reminds me of a teacher I actually did have. He was my science teacher, Mr. Bame, who okay, Dingo.
It's like, is anybody ever going to pay any attention to me?
He loved all of his students, and really, you could see the passion, and he wanted his students to succeed.
It's always funny when 8th graders look at you and say, well, that's okay. You love us anyways. And I always look at them and go, how do you guys know that? He's like, you just do. And I'm like, yeah, I do. But I wish it wasn't so easy for you guys to believe that all the time. And I think sometimes they push those buttons for a reason, because they want to see just how much you do care about them. And, they're kids too. So there's always that pushing of the fence. How much can I get away with? And what are you going to let me get around? And I told my kids, I said, I'm pretty low structure. Like, I'm not a sit on your desk kind of teacher, but like, I'm pretty low structure. So I kind of just expect you to come in my room and be a decent human being, because it's not new to you. I shouldn't have to teach you how to come into a classroom. I shouldn't have to teach you how to be respectful to another human being. Someone should have already taught you that. And so if the first teachers in a child's life were strict and motivating and wanted that for their kids too, then we would be in a better place. And teachers wear a lot of hats. Teachers are, sometimes babysitters. We feed kids. We love kids. We protect kids. We do so many things, and our schools do so many things that we're constantly trying to adjust our lives. What is his deal? Did he eat today? Oh, yeah. Maybe not. He did.
I think an accurate portrayal of how school really is and how teachers act and the whole struggles that they have in school and out of school. This little show out of Canada called Degrassi. In the 80s, it was Degrassi, and then in the 2000s they revived it, called
The New Class,
the Next Generation, which had most of the original cast come back, and one of the students of the show actually became a teacher in the newer one. His name was Snake, and he his stepdaughter is a student in the school, and that's where Drake came from before he was the big megastar that he is.
But I think that the truest portrayal of shows like that, where we're actually looking at kids and the diversity in our kids are so different, and there's so many things that are happening to them on a daily basis as they're growing up, that they need to have role models and people that can understand and identify with things that are happening to them. So we need our teachers and everybody in the profession to be almost as diverse as the kids that are coming in, both in experience and background. So, it's always nice to see teachers that weren't good students, right, because they are some of the strictest teachers.
Yeah. So then you look at shows like Girl Meets World, where he's actually a teacher in the school he went to, and his daughter is in the...
But it's kind of funny because you think, well, you're going to do these big things and you're going to do all this stuff, and you end up being the same thing as the person who meant that much to you. Like you become mentored by the person that you're going to become. And I just thought that was kind of cool. But yeah. I mean, I have, great respect for movies that portray teachers and the struggles we go through, but I have a great respect for movies that make it a little lighter, like School of Rock. And then Ryan Reynolds was in a movie called School of Life. And I think that by far is probably one of my favorite teacher movies. Mm-hmm. That one and Mr. Holland's Opus. I think those two movies defined my life as a teacher, like that balance between being a parent and a teacher, and the two kind of separate lives that you live, and being a mom and being a teacher, but also like the desire that you have. Like he wanted to write this amazing epic opus, and they felt the need to bring kids back that were touched by him to play it. And I think that that's the most appreciative thing that a teacher could ever see, is that all of these people came from all over the place and they've made amazing things out of themselves, but they still remember what that class did for them. And so when you think about, because it was always funny, because I'd always talk to, like, if I had kept in touch with some of my teachers, and like I have
didn't you had a recent conversation with somebody about
a teacher? we were just talking about a teacher, and it was funny how you don't think about them right away, but then when somebody mentions their name, you're like, oh yeah, I remember. And you're like, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder how did things went. And so I've had a few teachers like that. And so my first grade teacher was the teacher who realized that I couldn't read.
Is that the teacher that made you want to become a teacher? I remember there's a teacher that you told me.
She is it. That was also the year that I lost my dad. So there were little things that she was the one that knew I couldn't read. Like, I could read because the words were on the paper. I could make the words sound good, but I didn't have a clue what was happening. And
are we going to need these again?
I don't know, maybe. And then when my dad passed, she really, like, she sent flowers, and she came to the funeral home, and she, welcomed me back when I came back after he passed. And it was just it was nice to have a teacher that cared enough to make sure that, your family was taken care of and that you were okay. And she was much older. So I think the year I moved to Vegas is the year that she passed. And my aunt, I think, sent me her obituary. And it was really sad because I never did get a chance to tell her how important it was to me. And so the nice thing about it is when you see teacher movies, at least they do get that thank you, that appreciation at the end or sometime during it. Because the people, the students that Jamie Escalante had, there was a whole, like, after, like, they talked about what they'd become.
Yeah. Was it Lou Diamond Phillips, right?
Mm-hmm. But the actual students came back and talked about how much they appreciated him. And then, like I said, in Mr. Holland's opus, everybody came back and played his opus for him. And, movies like that just make you smile. And honestly, you feel good about your job, because in real life, they're so few and far between. You lose track of your students and you lose track of people. So Mrs. Caswell is actually the reason that I wanted to be a teacher. And then when I got into sixth and seventh grade, I had amazing teachers who were so cool about language arts. And I loved reading, and I loved writing and all of those things. So those teachers became a big part of my life too. So I think when we talk about these movies and we talk about the people that portrayed them, but we also talk about the stories that are behind it, it's important for us to talk about what life is like for teachers. Like, most of us do love our jobs, and that's why we continue to do it. And it's a rather abusive profession too, especially now, right now, and today is 2020 pandemic climate. I think that, I went from people saying, God bless you, you're the best thing that ever happened, to now it's like, well, I can't believe that you don't want to go back to school. And I'm like, well, just 3 years ago, it was okay for me to take a bullet for your kid, but now it's not okay for me to worry about my health and your kid's health too.
I completely understand.
So
let me ask you this, or more like tell you.
Let me tell you this.
Now's your chance. If there's someone out there that wants to become a teacher and they were looking for advice, what would you tell them?
Be ready for anything. Like, be flexible and be understanding, and never give up on your high expectations. Make sure your kids understand that you have high expectations for them, but be ready for anything that can come at you, because teaching is, I think they said teachers make 3,787 decisions in an 8-hour day, something like that. And it's always, those decisions happen in less than 5 seconds. So, we have to be ready for anything that walks through the door. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, there's no play. Like, you can go to an office, you can sit in there and you clock out, or you clock in, you sit at your cubicle, you do what you're supposed to do, and nobody bothers you most of the time. And then you clock out and you go home. And when you're a teacher, I don't think you ever really clock out. Like, during the summer, you're always thinking about what you can do better, and you're always thinking about the next thing. So I think that we have to be prepared, but then you have to remember what it was like your first year. It's like the first 3 years are going to be really hard, and you're going to wonder if you're doing the right thing, and you're going to disapprove or be disappointed in the things that happen, and you're going to think that it should have been better, and you have to give yourself time to learn. So I guess I would say be ready for anything. Like, be ready for the disappointment that comes with it, but be ready for the fun and the joy that comes with it, because that's there too.
And I think John Cena says it best: never give up.
Pretty much.
Hustle, loyalty, and respect.
If you can get through the first 5 years of teaching, you pretty much solidified your place. And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard not to care about the kids, more than you probably should. You want to protect them and make sure that they're making the right decisions and help them, but you have to.
He always has to make an appearance.
Yes, he makes an appearance on every show. But I think you have to know the line, and it'll be a very uncomfortable line because you want to help everyone. This
has been fun talking about teacher movies and shows.
I I didn't know how there were so many of them, and I'm like, well, I've seen them all and I love them all. So how do I?
So this one we've never seen. It was a TV movie.
Well, there's a handful of older ones that I've not seen or haven't seen in a long time. But I just did a search and I wanted to know what other ones there were, and there was
and this is about a first year teacher too.
So there's a movie called Detachment. It's got Adrian Brody in it. And he talks about finding his place as a substitute teacher in a certain school district. And then there's one called Beyond the Blackboard with Emily Van Camp, who was
she was on Everwood.
And Scandal, Revenge, right?
Revenge, yeah. And then she's in the MCU as Sharon Carter.
So it's a TV movie and I hadn't seen it before, so I want to check that one out. And then there's an Elle Fanning movie called Phoebe in Wonderland. And so it talks about I think a lot of the movies we tend to think are high school, older kids, but Phoebe in Wonderland actually takes place in an elementary school where the kids are, where Elle Fanning's character is struggling with rules and being accepted and things. So she has that one teacher that changes things for her. So check those out because those are new. Those are besides the ones that we've talked about today.
And then, this was a decent movie too, The English Teacher.
It had Julianne Moore in it.
Julianne Moore.
But there's a handful of questionable things that happen in that movie. Now I have not seen the Nick Nolte 1984 movie called Teachers, so I will check that one out. But yeah, when I will talk about movies that are about teachers, I end up talking about teaching. Sorry.
Well, I think it kind of went hand in hand.
I don't think this will be a highly viewed show, but
you'd be surprised. I think there are a lot of people out there that respect teachers.
I think there are. I think that there's just a lot of anger surrounding our educational system right now. And I think teachers take the brunt of that, unfortunately. And I think we shouldn't have to. I think we do a lot for our communities and we do a lot for the kids that we have every day. And that when they treat us like we matter less, it's frustrating. I have a college degree in what I'm teaching. I have a college degree in education. I understand the pedagogy of education. I understand my subject area. I understand the standards that I'm supposed to teach. And so I'm teaching all of that. So it's frustrating when people don't treat us like they treat doctors. We assume that doctors and lawyers deserve this ridiculous amount of respect. And there are just as many bad ones of those as there are teachers. So I think we have to level the playing field a little bit.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's not always about being paid more. I think that that's everybody's answer. But I want to be respected. So both by the people that I work with, by the outside world, and by the students that I teach. Nobody wants to come in and be abused by the kids that they teach every day. And I have been in schools where that was the case. And so if we want good teachers to stay, then good teachers have to be supported.
Well, with that said, I think we should end the show. Oh, Dingo agrees.
Yes, he says, pay attention to me.
But, if you're just joining at the beginning, Nicole had to talk about Chadwick Boseman. Such a sad look.
I probably shouldn't have. I think it's important that we honor people that make such a difference. And anybody who doesn't believe that Black Panther made a huge difference after its release is been living under a rock and not paying attention. So that being said, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think Black Panther paved the way for the multiverse movie to be made. because I think that finally pushed people to believe that Miles Morales should have headlining as Spider-Man instead of just Peter Parker. So I think it was kind of a big deal that we started seeing more diversity in comic book movies. But
and we'll get to a comic book movie episode in the future.
That's really difficult. There's a lot of comic book movies now.
Yeah.
Good and bad.
Good and bad, yeah. But as we said, next week there's no show. We'll assess the month of September and come up with some good stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Okay, I will.
So, yes. So, co-host, producer. He is the one that comes with everything. So it's not me. I will not take credit for that.
We would love to hear from you guys, though. What kind of stuff what kind of stuff you guys want us to talk about?
Yeah, and would you like to see the show become more maybe segmented, where part of the show is more about movies, and then part of the show is about reels and heels, about the wrestling? Because I know there's a lot of stuff happening in the wrestling world right now, with divergent companies and women's titles and lots of things going on in that world. So if you'd like to see our show become a little bit more segmented, put that in the chat too, because we're always looking to make it better. I mean, we can sit here and talk about things forever, but we want you guys to be interested in what we're saying and stop in and say hi. As we come to you from our kitchen table.
Yes. Until 2 weeks. You guys stay safe. Thank you for watching.